You're listening to the Mile You're In podcast. Everything running related, from 100 meters to 100 miles. And now, here's your host, Phil Patterson Jr.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Mile You're In. Today, I got a different topic, one that I think is very interesting, and I think all of us, including myself, will learn something new from, even though I have a little bit of experience looking into it and everything that goes along with it. But before we even go down that road, I want to introduce the special guest that we have today, Brenna Detra, who is going to explain her experiences and what she's gone through with this whole process. And it's, I want to say, like an eye opener to kind of like an unknown when it comes to sports, not just running, but sports in general. But I feel like running maybe a little bit more, because more of the popular professional sports have it a little bit easier, and there's more, I want to say, more financial freedom, where when it comes to running, it's like a lot of brands are more strict. So before we get too far into it, welcome to the show, Brenna.
Hi, Phil. Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here and to be on your podcast. This is my first podcast, so really looking forward to it and sharing some of my experiences. Awesome.
Well, I know we've been working on this for a while.
Yes.
But that's how this whole, I want to say this whole COVID quarantine thing has gone, where everything is becoming easier through social media, but still like scheduling stuff is still chaotic. So it's the benefit of social media, but it's still, life is still life. Things happen.
For sure. Heard that.
So before we get into the actual topic, now anyone, I don't know how many people actually listen to the podcast that also read the features and everything that I do on the website. So I'm going to have you introduce yourself, a little bit about yourself and any accomplishments, things you'd like people to know about you that didn't read the feature on the website, which if you haven't, maybe this is your chance, like when this is, you don't have to pause right now, but when this episode is done, maybe you should go check it, because she's still on the homepage too. So it's not even that hard. Just go to hillstriker954.com and bam, she's right there. Read more. So go ahead, Brenna.
For sure. No, you got my name right. You pronounced it correct and everything, which usually people stumble on that. So
I YouTubed a couple videos to make sure I got it right.
I love it. Yes. I'm from Peoria, Illinois, and most people don't know Peoria, but it's about 2 hours south of Chicago. I like to say Peoria, born and raised, and it's kind of where my heart is. My family still lives there, and it kind of molded me into the athlete I am today. We have some good athletes come out of Peoria. I know our claim to fame in the athletic world is Shaun Livingston. He's from Peoria, so for those of you that have heard of Shaun Livingston, that's where I'm from. But I started out sports really young. I was a 3-sport athlete. Anything that I could get my hands on in terms of sports, like a ball, I was good at. I adjusted quickly. I loved competing, and I'm also a competitor at heart. I would, compete with all the guys in gym class. I would play with guys in basketball 5-on-5 whenever I could, race against them whenever I could. And I just kind of knew that my sports and my athletic ability would take me somewhere if I stayed focused. And it ended up taking me to Wisconsin on a full ride scholarship. And I was a 400 meter hurdler, and I ran the 800 indoors, eventually taking me out to Boston, Massachusetts, where I ran for the BAA and under a few different coaches out here. But running at the pro level is definitely something that I wasn't really, sure about when I left college. So I've kind of just taken my experience and learned as I've gone. And this is something I definitely want in my future. And I know this is a topic for the podcast today, but, getting that shoe sponsorship is something that's hard to come by. And just working my tail off behind the scenes, and hopefully that'll eventually come to fruition. But yeah, that's a little bit about me. Sorry if that was so long-winded.
No, I like it, but like as you were talking, my brain started working, and
Okay.
and I had to Google real quick because I know who you're talking about, Shaun Livingston. I'm a big basketball fan, but it made me look back real quick into his injury, because I remember that was like the big thing at the start of his career, and because I couldn't remember everything that he had torn. But now as I'm reading it, I'm thinking about what we just talked about the other day with your hurdle injury. Did you?
Yes.
What was it that you injured again?
Oh my goodness. So I injured my ACL, MCL, my meniscus, my LCL, and I chipped a piece of bone off my kneecap, and I also dislocated my kneecap. So it was probably the worst injury that anyone in track and field has seen over hurdles. So it was rough.
So then my question is, are you familiar with his injury?
I am. And actually I watched his video after I had tore my knee, because my mom was like, Shaun, when he first got to the NBA, had a similar injury, and I watched it. And there's just something about that is, you just feel that pain. And like, I remember he had a nasty scream, and it was similar to how I kind of went down at nationals. I just rolled over on the side, and this lady was next to me, and I screamed, and I was like, my knee. And I knew something was really wrong. And I still to this day don't really know why that happened, other than I guess God wanted me to, experience something like that. But my first experience at a national level, it was devastating. But I was able to set my mind to it and work my tail off for the following, 9 to 12 months. And my surgeon was like, I've never seen anyone come back from this like you have, and you got to keep going to the Olympics. And I was like, I promise I will. So here we are. Not word for word, he said that. So
yeah, I just thought it was crazy, because I'm looking at this, I'm like, all right, they're both from like the same area. They basically had the same injury. That's like crazy. And you went to the same high school that he went to?
He did not. We actually went to rival high schools, which is interesting. But Peoria is so small. We're all like within 3 miles of each other. So it was basically the same high school, how you took it.
And like one other thing, sticking to that, like I noticed when you, in the video I saw, you also like, because I don't know what it's made of, but like the inside of the track, there's always like this little like bar or like
the inside rail. Yeah.
So when you fell on that, you didn't have like any rib or like injury there?
No. And what's interesting? That's the first thing people say when they watch that video. And I'm like, I didn't even notice that. I did fall pretty hard on the rail, but I guess luckily it was only my knee that was pretty damaged.
Yeah, that's crazy. So you're new on what I would say my radar.
Yes.
And the way I look at it is, that's part of the thing that kind of frustrates me with running. Is now it's tough because there are just so many runners. There's so many distances. There's like, it's not like more the professional sports where there's only 30 something teams in each league, and like it's easier to promote them, where running is just so widespread. But what's nice about it is the fact that someone like you that isn't sponsored yet can still compete at those levels and compete with the best athletes, sometimes even win those races and work your way up into that recognition of the higher brands. I know personally, just from like being what a lot of people call weekend warrior, we train during the week and then we do our little races on the weekend when we can. I know we always still try to look for somebody that can sponsor us in one way or another. Like even people that do podcasts, they're always looking for someone to sponsor their show and things like that. I consider you, I don't know how you consider it. I still consider someone like you a professional runner. So as a professional runner, like what are some of the struggles you've seen so far with trying to obtain a sponsor, whether it's a shoe sponsor, like any kind of sponsor in general?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I get that question can be answered many ways, but for me, I think sponsors, and at least these big shoe brands or even agents, are looking for you to have kind of that breakthrough performance. But the problem with having that breakthrough performance is you need everything clicking on the right day at the right time and being in the right race. But to get into those races, if you don't have, that major shoe brand or that agent that's speaking on your behalf, then you're not able to get into those faster races to run those times. So then it comes to the point where you're going to these meets and you're kind of in that second or third heat trying to run world standard times to earn a sponsorship. And it's a lot. I don't think that shoe brands in general look behind the scenes and what it takes. And that is so frustrating because as athletes, we're putting in the work and we feel like we deserve to have a contract. And we might see people who do have contracts who maybe aren't even racing or aren't even performing at the level that they're capable of. And we're just kind of squeaking by, with no help or no ability to get into these meets or into these races. And it's just really hard. And I've talked to a few agents, and another hand in that is they also take part of your money and your earnings. And you don't want to get an agent because then they take 10% of everything you're making. So, but how do you take that next step without an agent? It's a lot of politics that goes behind it. And, track is a sport where I always felt that it was so cut and dry. You're either fast or you're not. Like, you prove it on the track. That's it. And at this level, it has surprised me a little bit just how certain meets and certain races are conducted. And I guess I wish that was easier for me, but that's definitely something that's really difficult for me at this level.
Yeah. And it's like something I've noticed as well, especially like the last few Diamond League races that I've watched, is there's a lot of like big name athletes and sponsored athletes that are performing, I don't want to say poorly, because you're still going against some of the best in the world. Like, I see some people that just don't have as much success as other runners and athletes, and kind of have that mentality, almost like you said, the ones that aren't competing, like, how is this person still sponsored? And I know a couple of runners that I've interviewed have won a lot of races and beat some of these names that are sponsored. And I look at them and I'm like, again, this is a name that I don't see on a lot of track and field or running related social media posts or articles. I'm just stumbling across them by browsing through profiles that have certain hashtags and things like that. Like, why are, these group of runners and athletes not getting more attention?
Right.
And it's one conversation I had with a very popular runner told me, he was surprised when he actually got offered a position with a certain brand. I won't say who it is and what the brand was, but he was telling me like he was surprised because there's so many faster runners he's very successful in the distances that he runs, but he was like, there's so many better athletes that they could have chose. And he found out that a lot of it comes down to like that social media presence, because now that's like the big thing. It's free advertising. Yeah. It's, that communication with the fan base and maybe relating more to them. But then that got me down the road of, well, a lot of these people that are sponsored, we can't relate to. Like, when I worked at a running store and they had all these pictures on the wall of all these athletes, the customers that came in looked nothing like these runners and performed, like, didn't even attempt to do anything like these guys. They were like, okay, that's cool. That's not me. I need something that's more for me and what I do. What do you got? And that's where I think it's like a 50-50 like toss up, because like you said, there should be a mixture of like the performance base, but what can you do for the brand?
Right.
Not just what your numbers show. When you've reached out to certain brands, like what kind of responses, whatever you can say, I don't want you to pick off anybody, but like, what are some of the things maybe that you've been told to improve on, or that maybe that you don't have that they'd like to see, something that even like up and coming other athletes advice you could even give them, like, hey, here's what they're looking for?
Yeah. Recently after the trials, I wanted to reach out to just kind of a dream brand that I've always wanted to run for. And it was kind of unique to my event. And, he said a big thing that we look at is the all around athlete. So what do you bring to the table besides your performance in terms of outside of running? And also I would suggest that you up your social media game. And, I've heard it before, and I 100% agree. Like what you were saying, Phil, social media is a big part of it. It's just the era we're living in. And not to say that I'm not huge on social media, but I definitely don't post as much as the big names do, where, they might have something listed in their contract. They have to post every single day on social media. I'm kind of somebody that kind of likes to like working in silence. When you were saying we work during the week, and I'm the same way. I don't want to post every day what I'm doing for my workouts or where I'm racing, because that's just something that I like to reflect on personally. And I feel like my fan base may not be my followers base may not be too interested in that. But I know it's a big part. So it just got me thinking that I do need to if this is something I want, I may need to look at that even more and step that part of my image up. And another brand actually said, you don't fit exactly what we're looking for in terms of the running standards and the race times. And I was like, interesting, because they had someone on their team, one person actually, that I beat all the time in college. And it was just interesting because you don't really know. You never get a clear cut from these brands, a clear cut answer. It just seems like it's always different. It's not really based on what you would think it would be based on in terms of what's the word I'm looking for, objective traits. It kind of changes, what they say and what they want and what they're looking for. So that's what a couple of the responses I've gotten recently.
Yeah. And I know, like, I feel like they should have more, or they should be more open and explaining that, because,
right,
for example, with like the social media activity and things like that, as a ambassador for a few brands over the years, each brand that I've worked with, they all had different requirements, and then some were like request on the side, this many posts or this type of post, things like that, to where like Twitter, it's hit or miss. Like Twitter, I don't know, like I use that probably the most, because I feel like people use that the most, because it's like, you just get out your rants and you vent and stuff like that. And people are a little bit more open on Twitter, where like a Facebook and Instagram, they're more like the professional prepared post and everything like that. But I've always felt the same way, where like brands that wanted me to post a lot, I just felt like I was starting to just throw stuff out there that didn't mean anything to me. And I'm like, if it doesn't mean anything to me, it's probably not going to relate. Plus just the quality, like I'd rather quality over that quantity. I don't want to just post these terrible looking photos or, just stuff that, like you said, people that follow me on social media may not even care about. And you can tell, because you'll see where you get likes and you don't,
right,
and activity on your posts. But going back to the very beginning, where I said the financial side of it, where a lot of these brands, they can't really afford, like some of these other brands that are in multiple professional football, basketball, hockey, baseball, things like that. So they have to be very frugal with their spending. And I believe I heard they have like contracts and things like that. I don't know if Do you know anyone that is sponsored?
Oh yeah. No, they are under contract, and I guess in terms of the terms of that contract, they could go through an agent usually, because I've also heard that brands are more inclined to take you seriously if you do have an agent or that middle party that's acting on behalf of you, which is also interesting because it's all kind of like a money scheme at that point, because I'm giving money to this agent who's just speaking on my behalf, but you're still throwing money away at the end of the day that you don't really have at the beginning, because you're just starting to make a name for yourself and you come up in the running world. So
have you looked into like any ambassador programs or anything like that?
I have, and my worry there is that it kind of turns into a pyramid scheme, and the payoff isn't worth, I guess, the legwork to get to that point. And I don't know if I just say it, frankly, like, you want to have standards in terms of being an ambassador for something, because I'll get like people reach out to me on Instagram like, oh, you should rep our jewelry brand, or you should rep our swimsuit brand, but you go to their page and they don't have any followers. You're like, okay, no. But you know what I mean? Like, how do you pick and choose? Like, I did, when I first left college, actually, we were sponsored by Under Armour, and I reached out about getting a contract. And of course they were like, oh, not yet. We don't have space, but you should look into our ambassador program. And I did that, and it was kind of just like a 20% off gear sort of thing, partnership. It wasn't really an ambassador, title. So yes, I have looked into it, but what can they bring to the table as well? Because you kind of goes two ways. Like, if I'm gonna rep your brand, what can you offer me? It can't be just like 20% off some gear, to be honest,
No, you're actually spot on, because my wife gets mad at me a lot, because she'll especially lately, because she said my photography game has definitely stepped up, which I contribute to the ambassador team that I'm on right now, that I feel like is like a really good one. Because unlike, like you said, I've done a lot of different ambassador programs where same thing, it's 10 to 20% off of stuff, or you might get some free samples up front, but then there's nothing else after that. And maybe if you refer some people, you get a commission, or you just get a bigger discount. But this particular one I'm with, called BibRave, they work with different brands. So everything that I've gotten has been more for like a review purpose, trying it out, giving them feedback, helping promote the brand. So she still looks at it like, all right, well, what do you get? I'm like, well, I've gotten a lot of free hydration. I've gotten entries into free races. I've gotten a lot of free accessories and gear. Like, I even got a free pair of shoes one time. I'm like, for me, that's them doing something for me, almost more than what I'm doing for them sometimes. Because some of these brands, it's like I promote them, and my follower base isn't really into that, or they're not really responding, where other brands, they're more into it, and they'll start interacting more. But yeah, it's, she gets mad. She's like, they should be paying you. And I'm like, well, I'm just a nobody. And like,
that's not true.
Well, I'm on the smaller end, and I'm like, they could easily find another person who's looking for this opportunity and be like, all right, you want money? Let's go give some free stuff to this person instead. So I get it. Like, as a professional, another one of my friends that I've had on the site a couple times, I thought she was sponsored by Brooks all this time, because she's always wearing Brooks gear and promoting them, only to find out it's, like you said, it's just a discount that she gets on the gear. So there's no like true commitment, in my opinion. They could take that discount code away at any time, or you could just be like, all right, on to the next brand.
Right. And it almost feels too like, if you're posting with all this gear, like, my club is sponsored by Adidas, but I'm not under contract with Adidas. And so like, if I'm posting all this gear, it's like that image on social media comes into play, and people are like, well, wait, is she sponsored? Is she not? But again, you shouldn't worry about what other people are thinking, but it also is kind of like an integrity thing. It's your ego as an athlete. You're like, it's kind of odd for me to be posting all about this brand if I'm not actually sponsored by this brand. So yeah, it's hard.
So if you were put in charge of finding athletes, what is like, what would you look for if you were out trying to sponsor some athletes for your brand? What, like, in the sense of, what do you think would be fair, equal, kind of across the board?
Yeah. I mean, definitely the all-around athlete. I think history also matters too. How, like, their history on the track, off the track, where they're from, circumstances with how they grew up, their family life. Because I think that all goes into the athletes that we are today. And, who knows if my race had gone a different way and I didn't fall and injure my knee and have just this, like, most would say career-ending injury, that could have been the race of my life that I was talking about at the beginning of my podcast. And who knows, I could have a sponsorship, but it just didn't happen that way. But instead of looking at that at the times, look at, my comeback from that, looking at how much work I had to put in to get back on the track 9 months later and eventually get back to nationals the following year in the hurdles. Because I think that says a lot more about an athlete than anything, than just running a time. Because then you run into the situation, there's some athletes that, run this crazy time, but, don't come close to that, or don't have the love for the sport that other athletes do that aren't sponsored, because they kind of lose sight of why they're doing it. So yeah, I would say it's definitely an all-around looking at the all-around athlete and just experiences and overcoming obstacles, because I think that makes you that says more about your character than running a fast time or jumping far, throwing far. If I answered that correctly.
You did it. And I agree, because I think, like you had mentioned, that a lot of people get these sponsorships and they accept them because of the benefits they get from them, but they don't really have any connection or interest even in the brand. To them, it's just free money, easy money, and they're not big on how they really represent the brand. And I think you see that in the way some of these athletes will even just carelessly act. I mean, I would hope everybody would be themselves and be true to who they are, don't become somebody different for a brand. But at some point you do have to say, okay, there's certain things I can't do, or I shouldn't do, or maybe say, and they just don't think about that or think it through. And then, you see or hear what they're doing and you're like, I think of a list of athletes and I'm like, there's so many more athletes that would represent this brand better than this particular person. Why does this brand continue to support this person? So it could be a controversy thing. Like, I know, I've had a lot of female athletes tell me that, it's the body type, the look, the way you look or the way you dress.
Oh yeah.
The way you talk, where it seems like men seem to get away with a lot more. I think I've discussed this before with somebody else on the show, but there's definitely different standards. But then you look at like the way brands treat someone like Allyson Felix and what she was going through. And it's just tough. Like, these brands, I think they have it easy because there's so many people that are willing to accept that opportunity, that they may not be as committed to athletes as they should be, and they don't really look into it. Like you said, the all-around aspect of it. Because to me, a story is, and something that me as a consumer and as a fan, as a viewer, can relate to, to me, that's so much bigger than just someone who's accomplishing something that I can't even really imagine or understand.
Right.
As a let's say me, 100-mile runner, I've met a lot of these guys and women that can do these 100-mile races in 15, 16 hours, where me, I'm fighting just to meet the 32-hour cutoff. Like, they're done they're done when I'm hitting the 50 mile mark. And I'm like, but you get to know them, and they're so down to earth, and you know, they're willing to give you tips and talk to you, and some of them even have gotten into coaching, where a lot of these other athletes that are sponsored, it's like you can't even like reach out to them. Like they're so busy with all these obligations and all these things they have to do, that they have to squeeze in so they can still make enough time to train and meet those standards that they're supposed to. That I feel like it you know, again, it doesn't do anything for your brand. Half the time we don't even know what they're wearing.
Right.
You know, we just recognize them by face or whatever we know about them. And that's the thing, when I looked at you, and that was the first thing, I kind of felt embarrassed. I thought you were sponsored by Adidas, because you're constantly wearing Adidas gear and the kits and everything. And then I was like, oh, she's not. Like, now, actually, I guess I'll ask you that. Is that something, do they send you the kits? Because like I know gear you can just buy, and you know, maybe they send you some, but like racing kits, like, because I've seen the kit you wear, some other athletes wear, and I'm like, well, that looks like the same sponsored type. Like,
well, yeah, like I said, my club, the BAA, they've been great. They've supported me since I came to Boston, and it's odd because they're kind of drifting away from middle distance athletes and some of those shorter distances. But, you know, I came on the scene and I qualified for every USA's and eventually the US trials. And, they, you know, agreed that they would support me and continue to help me. So I ended up getting, you know, the perks of the gear and the uniform, because they wanted every athlete of the BAA to match at the trials. So, I was able to get that Adidas stuff, and you know, Adidas sent us a bag full of gear for qualifying for the trials, and I was able to receive that as well. So that's kind of why I'm wearing the Adidas uniform. It's kind of odd, isn't it? It's hard for me too, because I kind of have to remind people, like, no, I'm not sponsored, because I have to make myself marketable as well. And if brands think that I'm sponsored by another brand, then you don't want to create that tumultuous relationship either. So it's definitely been a tough position that I've been in, but I totally respect the BAA, and I love Adidas, and I want to run for Adidas, but if I'm not what they're looking for right now, I gotta do my part and make sure I'm in the future, I guess, I'm someone that they are looking at in terms of times and the overall athlete. So
yeah, and that's something that actually I'll have to look into. Like, I'm curious, because I know when I've mentioned you to a couple brands, one of the first things they ask is, are you currently sponsored? And I don't know if that's because they look at your pictures as well and see the gear, or if they're just asking in general, because maybe to avoid any conflict, they don't want to reach out to someone that's under contract. But I would still think, wouldn't they reach out? Because it's not like professional, you know, the NFL and everything, where you know these people contracts, they're listed, you know, when they're becoming a free agent, it's announced. Right. Where running, it's so
not talked about
behind closed.
It's crazy.
Right. So it's not like, oh, Allison Felix is in the last year of her contract. All these brands now are going to probably start hitting her up like, hey, are you interested in leaving so-and-so? You know, to where I would think brands that, you know, see you might not just automatically go, oh, she's with Adidas. You know,
right.
Like I would hope they would reach out and go, hey, how you like your contract with Adidas? And then that's when you're like, well,
right. I'm not actually sponsored. And, you know, it may be a respect thing too between the brands. Like so it's like a fine line. Like, how do you make yourself marketable without, you know, damaging or burning bridges with sponsors or brands that you've worked with in the past? So your guess is as good as mine. We're gonna have to do some research on that.
I mean, I could understand that, but in that sense that there's no knowledge of it, like I wouldn't expect they should be able to know that. So I would think, you know, if they're just like, hey, you know, I'm just curious, what's your contract like, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
But then again, it's competition. Like, I don't know. I think you're being a little nicer in that sense. To me, I feel like they're all like, it's a warfare out here. If we can steal your athlete, like, I don't care. Like, if I can get so-and-so on my brand, I'm doing what I got to do.
Right.
So if by chance some brands happen to stumble across this, what would you say to any brand that may be listening to the podcast and maybe interested, like, sell yourself? It doesn't even have to be a little elevator pitch. Sell yourself to these brands and tell them, why you feel somebody should give you a chance.
Yeah. And like you said at the end, why I feel like someone should give me a chance. It's just, it only takes one, is what I like to say. It only takes one person to believe in you. It only takes one brand to believe in you. And looking at my history and where I'm from and I guess my experience in sports and at this level, I have never shied away from any sort of competition. I get myself to the line, whether I blow out my knee or have an injury or not. I work my butt off. I don't ever question I let my hard work do the talking. I don't ever, I never think that I'm owed something in this sport or in sports in general or in life. I work hard for everything that I have, and I understand that's what you have to do. And but also, aside from track and running, while that's important, I'm also very invested in my family. I'm a huge family girl. I just completed my first year of law school. I actually stepped away from that to focus on running because this is something that's been a dream of mine, and to be able to run professionally and focus on this and make that dream a reality of being on world teams and going to the Olympics. I think that says a lot that I was willing to step away from law school to focus on this and just show that I'm dedicated and committed. But it only takes one. That's how I would say it. It only takes one. And all the question marks that they may have on the walls about me as an athlete and the times I've run mean little to what I feel like I can bring to the table and what I know I can bring to the table. Don't know if that was the best elevator pitch, but hope it resonated with most brands that happen to come across this podcast and listen to me and want to learn more about me and my life. So yeah. Is that okay, Phil? Are you on mute?
Oh, I was on mute. Oh my goodness. So I'm glad you said that.
I hope
so
you were
what
talking,
I was saying,
no.
I was talking.
Okay.
So what I was saying was that I like that you mentioned the law school, because that requires a large amount of your time. Like, I have a handful of friends that have completed it and a couple that are towards the end of completing it. That requires a lot of time. And to be able to do that and still train, and
I'm also working full time.
right. So you're going to school, you're working full time, you're able to still, without a sponsor, go to these races that require traveling. You're able to qualify for Olympic standard, like Olympic trials. To me, that's more relatable than someone who, like you said, the history does play a role in it. But to me, someone who's not really interacting with the people that buy your brand and wear your brand and represent your brand, I'd rather somebody who has that story that I can push and promote versus just somebody that probably has helpers that are taking all these photos that they can then edit and post on social media and do everything for them, where all they really have to focus on is training.
Right.
It's not just you train for 8 hours a day and then you race. Like, you guys have regular everyday jobs like the rest of us and are going to school like the rest of us. And to be able to do that is, to me, incredible. But again, these brands don't throw all that into factor when it comes to their decisions. And I think that's disappointing.
Yeah. It is. And, not to knock people that do only focus on running full time, but we kind of all have our own little grinds that we have. And, whether someone's doing it behind closed doors or posting about it on social media every day, I think it's important for brands to really delve into that and figure out and just see like what kind of person is this? What are they doing behind the scenes that's making them a better athlete tomorrow? And I wish like I didn't have to work and I didn't have to do all that I'm doing, and it got really hard some days, and I really think that's why I didn't perform to the level that I thought I was capable of this year and had the year that I wanted to, because I did have to work and make a living, because I don't have people that can help me or support me if I did just focus on this full time. So I think adopting some of that mentality too is important for brands, especially in track and field. There's so many opportunities to be at a professional level, but there's no money. There's hardly any money for all of these people. So I do think track is like up and coming in terms of popularity, and an Olympic year always kind of brings it out too, and controversies that are happening with the Olympics. But that should be every year, and I might be biased too, but that should be every year track should be a topic over the summer or whenever our season is, and it's not talked about enough. And I don't know if that'll change the game or change the perspective, but maybe that's something brands need to look at as well. Yeah. And I mean, I'm going back a little bit, but what you were saying in terms of image and what brands looking at what people look like, unfortunately, I guess image sells. And that's a big part of it too. And I don't know if brands look at that, but you would think that would kind of mean more, I guess not mean anything at all if they're running fast, but that kind of levies out a person that might not be as fast on the track, but has like a strong media presence or has the potential to have a strong media presence. So went on a tangent, but I was able to get that thought out. So,
well, I mean, I was thinking if all else fails, the ultra running community is getting popular. You could start running some 50Ks and who knows, you.
Oh my gosh. No, Phil, I'll leave that for you.
That's right. So I always give this opportunity on the website. And it's actually funny, like I'm not going to throw you out on the spot because I know a lot of people miss these things. But it was funny, like I just got a notification a little bit ago that all of a sudden you're following me on Twitter now. And I'm like, oh.
Yes. Didn't even realize I wasn't following you. And you said you use it the most.
So if anybody out there would want to follow you, whether any social media you want to promote, you have the floor to quickly throw that out there, especially for you brands that are interested in finding out more about her. Where can they find you at?
Of course. My Instagram handle is Brenna.13. So my first name and the first three letters of my last name, DET 13. I was born on August 13th. It's my absolute favorite number. I know some people it's an unlucky number, but fun fact, I love that day.
I was actually going to ask you that because I noticed 13 was in a couple of the handles.
Oh yeah. And it's the same on Twitter. So I keep it easy. And I'm also on Facebook. If you just search Brenna Dutra. I love Facebook too for news updates, as well as a lot of my family's on there. So I'm very active on those three platforms. And yes, so that would be great. And I will follow anybody that listens to this podcast or happens to come across Phil's website or page. And he's a great guy and he's doing really good work in the track community. So I appreciate everyone for listening in.
I appreciate you coming on the show. And before I let you go, if there's anything you want to throw out there, anything that we didn't discuss that you wanted to bring up, or anything, if you want to vent about something, again, I appreciate you coming on the show. So I want to give you one other opportunity if there's anything we missed to mention.
No, I guess one last thing. just this past month, I made a coaching change to Anna Grenier. She was she's a Big Ten record holder, and she was an Olympian in the steeplechase. And I totally believe in her work and her training, and I am excited to get going with her. And I really feel like this is going to be my year. So I'm really looking forward to it. And I just wanted to give her a shout out because she's doing a lot of work for me to get me back to where I know I can be. And I know it takes a lot of energy and effort and time. So I'm just very lucky to have her and be able to continue to train in the Boston area. So anyone that's listening, I am actively looking and searching for anybody that, may want a middle distance athlete to rep their brand. And I guess that's my final shout out. I'm gearing up for next year. I'm excited for 2021 or 2022. Oh my God.
I was going to say.
These years are flying by. Jeez.
So my last question, I guess, would be, being in the Boston area for as long as you have been.
Yeah.
Well, I guess the first question leading to that would be, are you a NFL, like a football fan?
Actually, I am a diehard Bears fan. I'm from Peoria, and my family are all diehard Bears fans. So no Patriots energy over here.
You saved yourself right there, because I was hoping you weren't going to say the Patriots.
Oh, heck no.
Everyone that knows me knows I was born and raised into Bills Mafia. So I'm actually kind of happy that we got your boy Mitch Trubisky, even though I know it didn't work out.
You could take it.
But
we're good over here.
I mean, he's our backup, so hopefully we don't need to use him. But I'm glad we got a experienced backup in case we needed him. But yes, I'm glad you're not at least a Patriots fan. And
I am not. Don't worry.
Okay. So again, and for you that are listening, I will throw her links into the show notes as well. So in case you don't have to replay it and try to write it all down, I will put that information in there for you to just be able to click and follow. Just give her time. She might take a little time to follow you back.
Good one, Phil.
So thank you so much for coming on the show. I truly appreciate it. And we're going to have you back in the future for sure.
I was going to say, this was so fun. Thank you so much for having me. And I really enjoyed this, Phil. Thank you for doing this.
Thanks for listening to the Mile You're In podcast. If you enjoyed it, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Check out previous episodes and more at HeelStriker954.com.